Hi, Chestnut Grove. This is Pastor Andy Gathman, continuing our How to Pray series. This is our final lesson, Lesson 8, where prayer becomes real. If you're finding us on YouTube, you might want to click on the link below, which will take you to our website, where you'll find some additional resources. Today, we're going to be talking about developing a prayer practice. And you may have wondered why we haven't gotten to this already, and that's in part because I wanted to make sure you had the tools that you need to even understand and uncover what prayer that connects with God is really all about. But if prayer is really about communion with God, then it stands to reason that we need to find a way to make that communion happen on a regular basis. And to do that, we need to develop a prayer practice. And this gets us into the realm of habits. I don't know about you, but in my mind, habits are very potent and powerful things. And they're also, they can be really tricky and difficult things. And I think as we approach habits, there are really two types of people. One person is the type of person who resists habits because in some ways, habits take away spontaneity. They inhibit the ability to be authentic. Nobody wants to be a slave to the routine. And so a lot of times for those folks, particularly when it comes to relational or spiritually meaningful things, we resist habits strongly. The downside of that, of course, is if we're not feeling it, if we're not in the mood, we may miss the opportunity to make a meaningful connection altogether. The other side of that are people who really like habits, for whom the habit is a wonderful thing that brings order to their lives. And in this way, those folks who develop good habits can, potentially not miss out on the opportunity to pray on a regular basis. But the flip side of that coin is that sometimes it's the habit itself that becomes the goal and not the purpose of the habit. So it's simply checking a box, perhaps, or feeling good about yourself that you've done the right thing. And the habit itself, in this sense, can actually get in the way of the deep connection and communion with God. It actually becomes a place to hide ourselves from God, all the while feeling good about ourselves for having engaged in the habit. So how do we escape this dilemma? Jesus himself offers us an invitation that I think speaks to the very heart of it. In Matthew chapter 11, verses 28 to 30, Jesus says this: "Come to me, all you that are weary and carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me. For I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Not only does Jesus free us from the burdens that we carry in general, but Jesus also frees us from the burdens that we carry about prayer, and specifically about developing a prayer practice. And I'd like to name just a few of those right now. The first burden that I think Jesus frees us from is the burden of the past. For many of us, we've struggled with developing a regular prayer practice. Maybe we've never done it. Maybe we've done it a while ago, but recently not so much. And that can create a terrible burden, maybe of guilt or uncertainty, not knowing how to proceed, feeling like we've got to get ourselves all cleaned up, put our act together. Jesus frees us from that burden. Whatever your past prayer life has looked like, Jesus clears that up with one simple and easy invitation: come to me. Come to me, all you who are burdened and heavy laden, I'll give you rest. Learn from me. So it doesn't matter where you're coming from, what the state of your prayer life is right now. Jesus frees you from the burden of the past with his invitation to come. The second burden that Jesus frees us from in developing a prayer practice is the burden of pretense. So much of the time we want to be just right for God. We come into church, we come into relationships with a sense of wanting to put on a good face. It's really what social media cultivates in us all the time, just showing folks what we think they need to see so they'll think well of us. And we bring that attitude not just into our social media, not just even into our church, but also into our prayer life. And when we're trying to be good before God, boy, that's a terrible burden to carry. And Jesus frees us from the burden of pretense and invites us to come as we are and to lay down our preconceptions, lay down our burdens, and come to him and to learn from him. It's an invitation to be brutally honest with ourselves and with God, because Jesus has invited us to come just so. The third burden that Jesus frees us from is the burden of performance. The sense that it's only if we do it right will our prayers be heard. Or if somehow we do it wrong, God will be displeased with us or not hear or not respond. This whole series, we've been learning about ways that we can pray, but we need to be careful that we don't trust our technique. Indeed, as we learned at the very beginning of this series, the Spirit within us prays for us when we don't know how to pray with sighs too deep for words. We don't have to perform in prayer. We simply have to bring ourselves honestly before God. And we find in that place that it's Jesus himself who teaches us. His yoke of learning is easy and light. And he frees us from the burdens of the past, frees us from the burdens of pretense, frees us from the burdens of performance, and simply invites us to come. And that's the place where prayer becomes real. This is such a wonderful invitation, the opportunity to seek communion with God, walking with Jesus in daily prayer. It invites us to lay down our burdens and to receive the easy yoke of Jesus' presence in our lives. And how do we do that? In a daily prayer practice that doesn't bring all those burdens back? Well, that's what we're going to talk about in our last video coming up next.